This is no race. You make what you can of your 20s. This is just part of your journey. This is part of your hero's journey. Like, that's what makes animes so interesting to watch. That's what I see life as. Constant beating harder monsters that you just get stronger. Hi, it's Lauren. I am turning 30 in 2 weeks. I was really lost and lonely and just scared most of my 20s. I constantly felt pretty behind in life and had a lot of pressure to perform. But despite the fact that my defining decade didn't unfold the way most of us feel like it should, I did actually learn a lot of really valuable lessons. Let's be real, it's unrealistic to expect to have a profound lesson every single year of your life. Instead, I'm just gonna share some of the most impactful lessons that really shaped me, then share maybe some words of advice from a budding 30-year-old. So unfortunately, I didn't learn anything when I was 20. I really just spent it trying to fit in, trying to please others, and doing things that I thought would give me like some sort of like social status, mainly because I was really sheltered in high school. And I think that's why I went kind of loose in college. But once I became a senior and turned 21, I really wanted to turn over a new leaf. That's when I learned the first lesson, and it was important to really take care of your body. And health is wealth, as corny as that is. But I started to hit the gym. I actually got into powerlifting and I realized I was really strong. I could never consistently show up to class, but for some reason I was able to consistently show up to the gym 6 times a week. So I really started to prioritize my health. I started to meal prep. I think people around me were really shocked to see that because I was in a fraternity, just being like a little sis who just really parties with all the guys. And I don't think anyone was really expecting that of me. I didn't expect it of myself because I hadn't done anything other than run in high school. So to be turning into like a health nut was kind of crazy, but I think something had clicked in my head. And you know how people say you should just chase your passions? That's what I did when I was 22 and I decided, hey, I don't think I'm gonna use my degree for anything. I'm just gonna go become a personal trainer because this seems like something I like. Let's just go for it. At 23, I decided to take my fitness game a little bit more seriously, especially after I had left like a codependent relationship. I really wanted to do something more independent for myself and do something that would maybe make my career look a little more credible as a personal trainer. So I decided to do this bikini competition. And if you're not familiar with bikini competitions, basically you step on stage in a bikini. And in order to do that, you have to be on very strict calories. You do a lot of workouts to get really, really shredded. I went on a really strict diet and I developed an eating disorder. I had developed such a terrible relationship with food that I could only see food as numbers and I would just binge in secret. And you should have seen the food that I was eating. Like, what is this concoction? Like, I thought this was so brilliant because it had so much protein in it. And really, it was just tasted like freaking goop. I don't even know. And I thought that was delicious. And that was the mentality I had. It was not good. And that's when I learned that how much you weigh is like the least important thing about you. I think I put way too much emphasis on the scale, and whatever number it was however much I was worth. It is important for you to be healthy, but do it in a healthy way. Does that make sense? Like, you wanna make sure you find a diet and plan that is gonna be sustainable for you. I'd be lying though if I told you that I fixed that issue when I was 23. That was an ongoing problem for another 2 years because I was too stubborn to really, I think my ego was just too big to really admit it. And despite being a fitness coach, I really didn't want to admit that I had this issue. By the time I turned 24, I had let go of a lot of relationships, and in hindsight, this was such a mistake because really it is so important to still keep your friendships despite being on a different path than them. Even if your friends aren't on the same path as you or same journey as you, like, don't let go of your friends. I really was starting to prioritize my own self-development. I got really into reading books. I got into like the whole girl boss thing. So any of my friends that I felt like were weak, if I felt they just didn't understand me, I just stopped talking to them. But truthfully, like, those were my mid-20s were really like some of my loneliest years, because at 24 I had started to build my own online business, and I even went on a solo trip to Bali. It was great because it was like my eat, pray, love kind of journey, but really like deep down I was so depressed and so lonely, and I think I covered up a lot of that with my girl bosshood. And at 25, I took it a step further. I built my first six-figure company with a friend of mine at the time, and I joined a lot of business groups. That was really like the peak where my ego was really riding along this high, because I thought I really figured myself out, and I really thought that I really knew something that other people didn't. I was on my grind, like no one else understood that hustle. I woke up at 5 a.m. every day, got to the gym, hustled, like grinded 24/7. Well, not really 24/7, I obviously slept, right? And it wasn't until the pandemic hit and it forced us all to slow down for me to realize you do not need to constantly be self-improving like it's something you need to check off of your list. You don't need to always be waking up at 5 a.m., grinding, doing all these things that all these gurus tell you to, and that there is time for play and that you should give yourself permission. By the time I turned 26, I had disbanded or closed down that business. I gave a much more funny approach to fitness. I started going on TikTok and making a lot of these really fun, cutesy videos. I really wanted to like not take myself so seriously, and it really took off. And I realized that it's totally okay at any point to rebrand yourself, and that like you're not gonna be stuck in one identity at all times, and just rebrand yourself when your values change. I don't know why I use this term rebranding. It is such an internet slang or internet thing that's going on right now where everyone has a personal brand online. What I really mean is no matter what, show up authentically as yourself and reinvent yourself at any point, and make sure that your external environments match how you feel internally at whatever point you're at. And no matter who is like doesn't approve of you, as long as you approve of yourself, that is like the most important thing. Okay, so at this point, right, when I'm 26 and like I'm entering my late 20s, I'm just like, okay, this year I really figured out my life. I really know where I'm going now. Each year I just kept thinking, I know what I'm doing now. And I always had so much certainty over that. Like I finally figured it out. I cracked the code on whatever these defining decade is supposed to be. I think I'm figuring it out. I finally made all the mistakes I need. But just as I was figuring out everything and felt like I had all this momentum, I was starting to lose a lot of interest in the fitness industry. And at 27, I probably entered into an even more confusing time for myself, because even lifting, which was such a fun thing for me to do that I turned into my passion, it really started to feel much more like a chore. I figured I just really needed to get new hobbies, so I started to get more into gaming. I started to stream on Twitch, and I was having a lot of fun with it, but then I started to also treat that like a job, and realizing, shoot, you probably shouldn't be turning your hobbies into a career or something you make money off of, because hobbies are meant to just be done just because, and otherwise you will lose a lot of joy for it, and it feels really forced. And that started to happen for Twitch too, and I started to not really like that as well. So then by the time I was turning 28, I felt the worst I had ever felt about myself. I felt more lost than ever. Why was it that I reached what I thought I wanted to achieve? Why did I not feel good about myself? Like, what is wrong with me? Like, maybe I'm just burnt out. Maybe I just need to take a trip to Japan, and just maybe that'll solve all my problems, which I did do. I took a 2-month trip to Japan right when they opened. I just said goodbye to everybody for a bit and just tried to think of like what the heck I was doing with my life, despite on paper having everything that I really wanted. Being chronically online all the time, I felt like I had to also turn this Japan trip into content. And I did document for a while, for maybe like the first few weeks when I was in Japan. And then I realized like, dude, like why did I come here? By making content there, I wasn't really getting away. I was still just in the grind. And for the first time, I finally got off social media. And that month I didn't post anything, that I didn't make any content, I felt the most peace and the most happiness that I ever felt in really like the entire time I was a content creator online. And I realized like, wow, like you really don't need to document everything. Like who said you need to make everything into content? At what point is your life your own? 1 month turned into 2 months, turned into 3 months of just not being online, not posting content, completely disappearing. And I felt great. And I realized like how important it really is to just take a step back from social media, and that like life continues even when you are not online. And life honestly kind of begins when you're not online and you're just living for yourself, and you can finally hear your own voices in your own, when you can finally like tune into yourself. If I had continued documenting while I was in Japan, I don't think it would have been the same transformative trip that I had taken. And considering that it was like a solo trip too, I really was able to just reflect and just figure myself out. Through that like social media break, I also felt like I was just following a lot of trends and just following what other people were doing, and realized I also just had so much massive anxiety around social media and just posting and constantly looking at my analytics and wondering if people still liked me or didn't like me. I guess I still had not learned what I needed to learn since I was 20, right? And not until really this year, I realized no one is really paying attention or really cares that much about what you're doing, whether you took a long break or whether you're changing your career or you're coming along reinventing yourself. No one really pays attention that much. It's coming from someone who is a very big people pleaser. It's so relieving. You might argue, oh, like people do care that like people are like watching me and monitoring me on my Instagram stories. Everyone's just gonna have a different perception of you in their head. And at the end of the day, who cares? Going to 30, I wish I could tell you I've got it all figured out because I learned all these things. No, I still know. I know for a fact I do not have it all figured out. But those were all lessons that I just felt like were so important to have learned. And I'm so glad I learned them when I was in my 20s. You know, when I was putting together all these pictures in each year of my 20s, it made me just realize like, wow, I've really changed a lot. And I am so grateful for the past versions of me for doing the best that she could with the knowledge that she had. And that's really all I can really ask for, even though they weren't perfect, even though I look back and like cringe at a lot of these pictures that I even posted like for the internet. Some versions of me I really did not like, but if it weren't for that person, I wouldn't be where I am now. And I feel like I'm finally doing things for myself and actually have a pretty good balance of work and life. I think if I had to describe where I feel now is I just feel more free, more calm, and I don't feel like I need to be like everyone else anymore. There was never a finish line. There was never a deadline for all of this. It's just as long as I've tried my best and I'm living my life and I have good people around me, like that's what this all is about, right? I don't feel so much pressure for myself, and I genuinely feel like I'm actually like a friend to myself for once, which is crazy to say. I really believe that your life will be better, and that this, whatever you're going through, like this is just part of your journey. This is part of your hero's journey. Like that's what makes animes so interesting to watch. The heroes had to go through some monster, and then they go through a harder monster, and that's what I see life as, just like constant beating harder monsters that you just get stronger. This is no race. You make what you can of your 20s, make the mistakes that you need to make and learn the lessons. And obviously if you can learn lessons from other people, that's even better. Some of these things you may just have to go through first, and then you'll think of like, oh yeah, girl Lauren on YouTube. Like now that I've gone through it, what she said makes sense, and you're gonna rewatch this video because of that, right? Yeah, life's good. And life's gonna be great when you turn 30, whenever that is. So don't give up. Your life's not over at 30. My life is just beginning.